Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Hybrid Healing Hour. Today, we have our renowned dietitian with us, Susan Greeley. Welcome back. You've been on our podcast several times, and we love having you on so much. You're always a wealth of knowledge. So please, for those who have not listened to you before, can you reintroduce yourself and tell them a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today? And then we're going to dive right into this recent topic of discussion, flipping the food pyramid.
Excellent. Well, hi, Deanna. Hi, Dr. Brian. Thank you for having me back. Thank you for that intro. I always love coming onto your show. So I am Susan Greeley. I am a registered dietitian nutritionist, have been for more than 30 years. I've seen a lot over those 30 years, so I'm really excited about today's topic. And we're going to, cover the history of dietary guidelines for Americans. This is the 10th edition that has come out recently, and what you mentioned is the new inverted food pyramid. So thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to always be here.
And it's funny, the food pyramid was not controversial for the longest time, and now all of a sudden it's become very controversial. And I think that's probably more political than anything else, but still there's a lot of misconceptions that I think we should talk about.
Well, when I've mentioned it to people, patients, other friends, family, whatever, I talk about the food pyramid, and they're like, what is that? A lot of people I think it's gone under the radar.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people don't know. I mean, this is something I knew and learned about when I was in grade school. And so I've learned about it and known about it, and to be honest, have not followed it for like 10 years because I don't believe in it. So I would love to talk about that a little bit more. So why don't you, here I am talking about the pyramid, which is more the visual. And I think that's the easiest thing that people can understand, but it's a lot deeper than that. So can you please tell me, tell our audience, what's the relevance of this food pyramid and or what is it related to?
Okay, thank you. Let's start with that, just a little historical context and what we're even talking about. So recently I said there was the 10th edition of the Dietary Guidelines for Americans that came out. So the U.S. government, this isn't new that we're talking about nutrition for the public. Public health policy is something we're constantly working on and extremely important for the health of all Americans. So it relates to truly the health of all Americans and what do we eat on a daily basis, long recognition of the fact that our food choices impact our health. And, we all need to work to meet our nutrient needs, to maintain our health, and to prevent disease. So the original guidelines came out in 1977, and it was followed up. That was the first dietary advice, and that was really more consumer focused. And even at that point, the government was focused on helping Americans do eat to meet nutrient needs. And it said at that point, prevent illness. And we talk about prevention of disease or reduce illness was in the original guidelines. Really interesting. And that message has not, maybe it's gotten lost along the way, but it really hasn't. We're still talking about disease prevention, right? And we as healthcare professionals are constantly focused on this and educating patients, i.e., the general population. So in any case, this recent dietary guideline report that came out it's updated every 5 years. So there was a little bit of change in it, but not a lot. And if you're like us, who's tuned into this, health information all the time, there was a lot of, I'll call it hullabaloo, and even, political conversations about it. But from my perspective, it doesn't have anything to do with politics and shouldn't, the way we eat and feed Americans. So we'll dive more into that. And nutrition education and nutrition recommendations are not a partisan topic, but somehow it becomes that. So we can talk about all this because it's important, it's relevant, it's timely.
Now, when you said earlier disease prevention, was it mainly cardiovascular disease? Because it seems like they weren't really looking at things like Alzheimer's disease or cancer, because we do a lot
of diabetes.
Right, we do a lot of dietary consulting in our practice, and a lot of it has to do with what you're trying to prevent, right?
Correct.
So for people with Alzheimer's, we're strict about low sugar and things like
carbohydrates. Yep.
I know. See, we have so many topics within this topic that we can talk about to help the general public understand how to eat to prevent chronic disease, which what falls under chronic disease, it has changed over the last couple decades, the emphasis on it. But look, we all know cardiovascular disease, number one, still the number one killers. But under cardiovascular disease, you just talked about dementia. And there, thankfully, is more recognition of the fact that our brain health falls under that, right? And preventing high blood pressure, preventing type 2, and now we talk about type 3 diabetes. I know we're digressing and getting a little bit away from the food pyramid, but it's important because that's such an oversimplified visual that confuses people now when we're talking about disease prevention. And even within the dietary guidelines for Americans, it incorporates very specific recommendations, such as keeping your daily saturated fat to 10% or less of your daily calories, right? That hasn't actually changed. The new guidelines actually don't recommend any added sugars for children up to age 11. I mean, that is a big change. Or how do we implement that into people's daily eating? That's not easy.
That's gonna be tough for a lot of people out there. Yeah.
Right. And we can talk, and you and I like to talk just about added sugars and
right. This is what I preach on an everyday basis to everybody. I'm like, stop eating the added sugars, I just had that discussion with a diabetic this morning. She literally had a protein shake and she's like, Deanna, my sugars, like I looked at her readings and her sugars shot up to over 300. They were not bad. Wow. I said, what is in that shake? And so I pulled up the shake. The shake says no added sugars. I said, I don't think it's a shake. What did you mix it with? She said, almond milk. I said, you need to go home and look at your milk. I guarantee it has added sugars. And she's like, well, can I mix it with water? I said, sure. It might just taste like chocolate water, but that's okay. Like I did that while I was in college, I had 2 chocolate water protein shakes every day, but I wasn't needing the extra fat, that milk provides, or, at that time it was, there weren't very many plant-based milks. But, the one thing I was reading about the guidelines from the past to current is that it wasn't really based on chronic disease prevention in the past. It was more so which I think they did change over time. But initially, do you think it had more to do with let's prevent scurvy and more just iron deficiency things, nutritional needs like that? Because when you look at the original guidelines from 1977, wasn't it more so about, okay, you need
nutritional deficiencies,
right, 6 to 8 servings of fruits and vegetables per day, or I don't even know the guy.
Right. No, it didn't even include the portions.
Okay.
But it talked about eating a variety of foods, preventing micronutrient deficiencies, and you're absolutely right on about that. Since World War II, there has slowly been a shift in prevention of cardiovascular disease, but originally, you're right, we were preventing diseases of deficiency. We have come way past that. They are virtually non-existent in the country anymore. You don't see deficiencies.
And I don't think it's coincidental that around the same time that the food pyramid and the guidelines changed, the obesity rates started spiking up and climbing.
And that's what I was going to say. How we have obesity, heart disease, and diabetes when they were trying to make it heart healthy in the past. So can you elaborate on that and your thoughts?
Absolutely, a lot. I have a lot of thoughts, insight, experience. When we put out these guidelines and recommendations and even nutrition education, look, as a dietitian and among thousands and thousands of dietitians out there, we're working hard to educate consumers, to educate individuals on making healthier choices. There's still a disconnect between what people eat and what we're telling them from this education and truly from the health standpoint, because they're bombarded by food everywhere. So it isn't, you can put out the most perfect guidelines and even perfect infographics, right, that outline how we should be eating. And, I don't necessarily like should statements, but what do people do on a daily basis when you walk down the street and you see how many different places to go get quick and easy calories?
Absolutely.
Right? And they're tasty. And the cheaper it is, hate to admit it, but with kids now, they go through drive-through, and it's easy to order these menus, the boxes now. I'm trying to not give away specific fast food joints, but they're out there, and this is how a lot of young people eat now, or even going to get drive-through coffee drinks that
full of sugar.
Full of
oh my gosh.
sugar. So
If
how
you-
do we say have no? Sorry.
Yeah, like frappuccinos, holy cow. Like,
Exactly.
Don't even get them.
So the guidelines, and I'll talk about this inverted pyramid that has caused an uproar, in the world of nutrition, and it shouldn't cause an uproar. It's a pretty basic infographic, and it's not all bad, it's not all good, but the bottom line is it's like focused on eating real foods. It's a good message. So that alone is a good message. I take issue with certain aspects of it. Among all the good, whole, healthy foods out there, from a nutrition science standpoint, we do know that a Mediterranean diet, a whole foods Mediterranean diet, really is the best diet to help maintain health and prevent these chronic diseases that we see all the time, such as Alzheimer's disease. And I don't know why we're bringing that up when, there's so many chronic diseases that you see every single day.
For heart disease, diabetes,
Right.
like
Autoimmune
in general.
diseases.
Autoimmune, exactly. I mean, we've been preaching whole food for a long time.
Exactly.
But Mediterranean specifically, you happen to get the good oils. You happen to get the fish and clean food with that diet.
And my favorite tagline that I've been saying probably for 25 years at this point, which is to get good fats, fiber, and phytonutrients.
Yes.
I
I remember that from our previous podcast. Yes.
See, and I get a chance to keep repeating that. It's important. And what does that look like? Well, now this food guide pyramid has brought the topic of fat back up, but there's still that disconnect. How do you limit your intake of saturated fat at the same time as showing a big stick of butter and fatty meats and all that? So there's issues with that. But back to what's good is the lack of refined sugars, right? We're talking about limiting and really reducing ultra-processed foods in the diet that we know is what's contributing to obesity in this country and diseases of inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
So again, back to, it's not that those guidelines have changed dramatically or that they're bad. And even these, again, the pyramids, the My Plate, what we've had, they're all intended to help people choose healthy foods. But then, like I said, you go to what we're eating on a daily basis, and our food industry is broken. Like the food supply and food industry is broken.
Let's elaborate a little more on when we look at the old pyramid, what it was is at the very top, you had a large amount. It wasn't it grains
or the bottom
or the bottom. I'm sorry. Yes, I forgot how it was. Yes, and so they wanted the larger amount to be grains and
breads, whole
breads,
grains,
yes.
the complex carbs.
And to me, if you're going to do that, I think of if you're going to have that, I would think oats. I would have whole wheat. But what I think people were getting is, if you look
White
at
bread.
Yeah, exactly. Most of the bread
Refined
that we
flour.
have is refined flours. It's bleached. It's, there's so many other fillers in it now that nobody looks at the label of their bread, and, now we know, unfortunately, most of our crops are sprayed with phthalates. And so it's whether you have a gluten sensitivity or is it the phthalates that are spraying our wheat that are causing that? We don't know, right? So it's just, sure, if you're making sourdough bread at home, go for it. Like if you know what you're putting into it, it's clean ingredients. And I think that's where we go back to the whole food diet, right? Like, are you getting packaged foods or are you having clean organic oatmeal for breakfast and where you're getting fiber at the same time, or are you just eating buns from McDonald's on your burger, so there's a difference. And what I think a lot of people didn't realize is this also was very fitting. I'm not saying it's from the Kellogg's because we discussed that, but it was also very fitting with the big production of cereals in the morning, right? And what are most of those cereals containing? Tons of sugar, tons, and bleached, refined grains.
Sugars, and some even have artificial colors, which I'm not a fan of.
Exactly. And so a lot of this was what people are having as their breakfast or most important meal of the day. And so it was just an unfortunate situation. I think that like you said, here we are trying to educate people. And it's not necessarily that the food pyramid in the past was bad. It's just that the choices that people have made and have been thrown at them, and they see commercials for them over and over again. They think it's okay, right? You got Tony the Tiger, who's athletic. Why wouldn't you want to eat Frosted Flakes, right? So that's my whole controversy with this. So I'm hoping that when people can see these new guidelines and they're seeing the top, and you want to read it from top to bottom, left to right, you're going to get that protein, the fats, and the And if anything, think about the fiber, but it's more like breads are less in that category.
Where do I take that? Okay,
Yes.
so I think we'll start with that that original food pyramid from 1992, and that was about the time, I hate to give it away, that I was becoming a dietitian or did become a dietitian, entered my dietetic internship, and it was then that fat-free craze
Yes.
that made Americans fatter and unhealthier, and heart disease increased like dramatically. So what we've learned from that is that by switching away from good healthy fats, limiting the amount of good fats in the diet and replacing it with carbohydrates that were never intended to be the refined carbohydrates and sugars, but that's what happened. And I have specific memories of even classmates of mine eating, say, a plain bagel covered in jelly, right? All refined carbohydrates. Thankfully, not thankfully that we learned the hard way from that, but thankfully we've gotten away from that. And so now with the refined sugars and the added sugars being not lumped together with the fats is a good thing because they're very different. So fats were vilified, but we all know that not all fats are bad. In fact, the body needs good fats. And so we did do a podcast on fats and seed oils. Like I want to refer.
We did. I know. Yes. Go back and listen
listeners
to
back
that.
to that. Exactly.
You can learn a lot.
It's an important one.
It is.
Okay, so that was that 1992 food guide pyramid that came out, and then it was updated and included some physical activity, and I think that that's missing now. All of these talks about nutrition can't exclude the fact that Americans are sedentary. And we talk about it a lot in longevity and in our group, you and I, and for making Americans healthy again, we need to get them moving more. So we can talk till we're blue in the face about what to eat and what not to eat, but if you're not exercising, honestly, we're not going to move the needle.
I agree.
I wanted to put that in there. So that was one of the food pyramids, but the pyramid itself confused people. All these guidelines, though, on healthy lifestyles do include other aspects of the lifestyle, not just nutrition.
Yeah, and you said that's lacking from this guideline
It
now.
is, yeah.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, you said it was originally like, 100 pages or so, and now it's down to like 6.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
which is
Things
crazy.
like
I mean,
10
they cut out a lot, but then they also kept things that doesn't make sense to me. Here we are saying, okay, go eat your meats, go have the good fats, which are what? What kind of fat is it that is good? Is it the saturated fat or the monos unsaturated?
Right, exactly.
So I always I'm not gonna lie,
that's
I always
okay.
I'm like, I know what good fats are, so I just eat those and I don't pay attention to like the number, but it's still confusing, like people are still going to need to watch to have less than 10% of the saturated fat in their diet
every day. So the more fat you consume, and the food, if you consume, so in general, the more fat you consume, the more likely you are to exceed that amount. But then the more foods you consume that are high in saturated fat, whether that comes from beef tallow or butter or even coconut oil, which are all very high in saturated fat, it's very easy to go way above that amount of saturated fat, the total recommendation.
right?
So that's a problem.
Right. So if you really want to, what are some examples of the good fats that they could have instead of overdoing it on some of those?
I'm a big proponent of getting seeds in your diet every day, nuts and seeds. And I say seeds more so than nuts for a very specific reason. People tend to we like to overdo things in this country. And so I see plenty of
No,
people
really?
overdoing the nuts. Whereas the seeds, take flaxseed, pumpkin seed, hemp seed, chia seed, and
Sunflower seeds? Are those
sunflower seeds.
Okay.
They're good. They're a little bit higher in. So all those seeds are a good source of essential fatty acids, meaning the body doesn't make them. We have to consume them in our diet.
And I think people are confused now because we talk about how bad seed oils are. That
Yeah.
it's not the seeds that are bad. The seeds are
seeds.
perfectly fine. It's
Right.
the process of refining the seeds
Exactly.
into oil.
Bingo.
Again, go back and listen to
Yes.
go to the podcast we did together on the seed
Yes.
oils. It's really important to understand what they are and what are the healthy oils. And so the seeds are actually the source of the healthiest oils for us, meaning essential fatty acids, the omega-3s and omega-6s. Okay. So much gets lost in translation. I'm trying to
Right.
keep it simple here.
Yeah.
But so back to like, what are the good healthy fats when I talk getting your good fats, fiber, and phytonutrients every day, focused on that. the rest can fall into place. Well, if you're consuming nut seeds, including some amount of olive oil. Okay, so let's say, how do I get olive oil every day? Well, make a salad and use it on your dressing. If you're not eating salad, you don't have a vehicle for that healthy.
I just douse my dinner with it.
Absolutely.
Like I'm just drizzle
oil.
some olive oil
Drizzle
on it.
some-
Like
that's a
yeah, I mean,
great
because I
habit.
agree. Like if you have more of the omega 3s, you know, like and that's a good source of omega 3, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and so then it can
Plant
balance
oils in
out the
general.
bad
Yes.
omega 6s because as we talked about before, it's about the ratio.
Exactly.
Right. So yeah, I mean, you can put olive oil on anything. You don't even if you don't like salad, then just put it over your mashed potatoes.
Absolutely.
Who cares?
Your
Like,
vegetables.
Yeah,
and
your
that
vegetables.
helps with the
like,
absorption of the fat-soluble vitamins.
Yeah.
Okay, that hopefully you're eating those vegetables that are a good source of, say, vitamins A and K and E, and drizzling olive oil in particular, because it tastes good too.
Yeah, it does.
It's one of the best sources of antioxidants in our diet.
A legit
addition-
olive oil. Don't get
legit.
the one that's blended with canola.
Right,
That's, you know,
right. The
make sure it's in a-
processing of oils
Yes.
is literally the most important aspect when choosing healthy foods. And it across the board, when we are showing these pyramids and showing the foods out there, quality of your calories really matters.
I'm so glad you touched on this. Let's talk about the quality because honestly, even when you talk about meats, like we're not talking about freaking bologna, okay? We need to go in hot dogs, right? And we're not talking about the burgers from McDonald's. Like
Correct.
I recommend highly like grass fed, and I'm okay if it's even like, you know, ranchers out west, they'll do the corn finished, you know, like they'll do mostly grass fed, but then they finish it up so it gets some fats right before. But they're not like, as long as you can look up these ranches now and you can look at the lifestyle and the quality of these cows. And the last thing you want is for that cow to have a lot of oxidative stress right before butchering. And that's a big thing now. You want them to have a nice life and then they can grow into a, what do you call that? I'm missing the word where it's like a humane,
That's
you
a
know,
humane-
yeah,
yes,
like a
yes, yes.
humane butchering process,
Right.
basically. So I order from a ranch that I can see them on the farm and I see like, you know, how clean of a life they're living almost a better life than I am down here in the pollution, you know, and it's like, it's great. And so the food tastes delicious. I trust it's clean and it's a good source and I feel good about it, you know, and nothing has really changed on my numbers either. Like in a sense of cholesterol wise, it's not going
Right.
worse, and I've been eating a lot of meat.
You know, we were talking separately about that individually because we're all healthcare providers, and it's fun to look at people's labs and we can see evidence, but that's when we're talking about individuals. And so I know many people like to argue about like carnivore diet versus vegan diet, and I say truly any diet can fit and can be helpful if it's done the right way, such as focusing on the whole foods that and you know the source of it, and again back to the quality of it. I'm a big fan of grass-fed beef and eating less of it. You know, it's expensive too, so
Right. You don't need to eat a 10-ounce steak. You
Right.
can have 5 ounces, and it's enough to give you the dietitian, the amino acids you need, right? To
Yeah.
the protein that you need. And then always like my rule of thumb, and I like kind of goes with yours, is I always have a green with every meal. So that makes me have a vegetable with every meal, you know, and usually the vegetable I pick is going to have fiber in it as well.
that's what's missing from this new updated pyramid is that there are so many foods out there. There are so many vegetables, fruits. What I dislike about it shows 2 walnuts and a huge stick of butter. But anyway, so
Right.
it needs to show more of the cruciferous vegetables, like where are the Brussels sprouts, the
broccoli.
asparagus, the broccoli. There
Yep.
is a broccoli. People always put a broccoli, and that's kind of it.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't like broccoli.
Exactly. Let's see some other vegetables
Yeah.
on there
And fruits and vegetables are usually lumped together.
together.
Yes.
But are they the same? Can you?
Well, they're not the same, but I'll make an important point there when we're talking about sugar. So sometimes fruit gets vilified, and I'm the first, you know, any dietitian, any nutritionist, any person who understands healthy eating is going to say, eat more fruit. At least I hope so, because Americans in general don't get enough fruits and vegetables. Then within that, again, there's individual variation. There are people with diabetes. I'm not going to tell them to go and consume, you know, as much fruit as they want. That aside, for a general healthy population, it's important to consume both fruits and vegetables. And the fruits tend to be higher in things like potassium. They're high water content foods. When we want people to increase their intake of fiber, fruits are a great way to do that. and it could be, is it always berries? Well, if berries are in season and it's easy to get, but down here in Florida, I was just exploring local fruits and I saw some that I've never even seen before. So I love that. I like to say, eat local and eat what's in season. And then you're getting the different micronutrients. That goes missing too, that we need to get a variety of micronutrients. So many people fixate on the macros, the carbs, fats, and proteins. And the message needs to be with more emphasis on getting adequate micronutrients. And I said that the whole goal of the dietary guidelines is to make sure Americans are meeting their nutrient needs. Mm-hmm. Children, adults alike, the majority of Americans do not meet their micronutrient needs every day.
In our clinic, the way I always tell people when I'm talking about diet is I'm like, you need to get the colors of the rainbow, and I'm not talking about Skittles. So it's like, that's, I think,
or Fruity
of like,
Pebbles.
Right, or Fruity Pebbles, exactly. Like I love, like, that's where salads really, you can make a salad taste good too, whether you like it or not. Like, I could make you a really good salad. And chopping up all the different colors. I love, like, getting orange and yellows and green, like the greens, and all different colors can go on that one salad. And that's a very hearty meal. And you could throw on the seeds, like you talk about, like
seeds,
much.
Some chopped apples, some pomegranate seeds. So back to the fruit, right? I don't think people need to be afraid of fruit, in other words. And most people don't get enough. And there are a lot of phytonutrients, fiber, vitamin C, folate.
One thing I noticed that wasn't on this one is a cup of juice. They used to have a cup of juice as a picture. Saying, fruit juice, like grapefruit juice or something like that. Right. And it's like, no, just go eat the juice. Right. Go eat the grapefruit. Yeah, get the fiber. And that's why I'm also a fan of, like, when people do juicing, I'm not a fan of that because you get rid of the pulp. I'm actually a fan of blending, like just blend it so you get smoothies more, so like where you can get the fiber.
No, that's great advice. And talking to individuals, I want to say, your patients are very lucky because they get this one-on-one advice and can do that interpretation of, what I need as an individual. But again, this is all based on the population at large.
Yeah. And, one other thing that maybe you can touch on this, and we've talked about this in the past on other podcasts with you, but does this impact people culturally? Like, America is a blend of cultures. So by changing this food chart, this is going to impact now the school system. Correct. And the hospitals and things like that. Do you foresee this impacting, like, is this still available and easily able to be followed for all different cultures?
My short answer for that is no, unfortunately. Okay. I think it's short-sighted in meeting those needs of the different populations, sadly. So when it comes to creating, say, federal nutrition programs, I think that they don't have enough information in these
guidelines?
Yeah, in this recent edition, unfortunately. So they'll have to, like, keep the 20 to 25 edition to get into the specifics of creating programs, school nutrition programs in particular, right? That's what schools, people don't know this, but in this country, why do you say as children, we remember this, but then we turn into adults and we're not exposed to this anymore. Mm-hmm. But this is really to set the standards for nutrition education in the schools, and again, creating nutrition programs, lunch programs, things like that. One of my first jobs as a dietitian was working for WIC, Women, Infants, and Children, and that's where the guidelines come from. Well, this recent edition doesn't have enough information to create new standards for any of these programs. By the way, this pyramid, I'm just going to call it that. It took me a while to figure out what the one bowl is with the red thing on top, and then I finally realized it's rice and beans. I'm like, well, it's still not enough. It's too oversimplified, and that's what happens. It's okay. So again, into the individual education, you really rely on the professionals, right? And that interpretation and teaching them. What I don't see on there either is a big block of tofu, for example.
Right.
We have, and then to the fiber. So in the guidelines, the 6-page or 10-page report, whatever, depending on how you look at it online, it talks about the gut microbiome, which can be pretty complex. And we recognize this when you're talking about Alzheimer's. We were saying diabetes prevention, type 3 diabetes. So I wanted to focus on that a bit. Again, there's like, how do we take that and saying, get more fiber in your diet and have a healthy gut microbiome? And it talked about fermented foods, but there's none represented in that pyramid.
Oh, is there not? Okay.
So what
no
are some of
kimchi
those?
or
No.
nothing like that.
Right,
Okay.
right. And is America ready to see a jar of kimchi on a food pyramid?
Right.
I don't know.
I just don't believe that you can oversimplify things.
Right.
It's not, nothing is that easy. Then,
Hence, nutrition policy is not easy.
and we get into the whole problem with cost of food, right? Is
Right.
healthier food more expensive? Now, we know that fast food the prices have gone way up. Fast food is not that cheap anymore.
It's not at all.
No.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be spending on average of $20 on crap food, I may as well just spend $25 and go get better food. Like I'm really, or just bring your
If
own.
you have the time. No, I
Yes.
completely agree. I have
Yeah.
some, they're not children anymore, grown college-age adults, and I'm proud of them. I think I've brought this up on other podcasts, but I have one of my boys now, we had this conversation yesterday about getting the meal pass for on-campus dining, and he said, oh, well, I can use it for his favorite fast food places. And I was like, well, that's not really the point. He said,
Right.
He said, but I have been cooking every day and packing his lunches, and because it's so much more cost effective.
Yeah.
And I was so happy and proud to hear that he's aware of the cost difference, that it is much more cost effective. And we all know this, to buy the ingredients and make it yourself. And I can go on my rant about not having home ec classes in schools. And I think it's really, really missing and needed to bring them back at a younger age, such as in the 6th grade, for example, how you can go to the store and buy these ingredients and what it costs, and then take it home and make your own burrito to carry with you or whatever it is. Or, so that was my little digression there about food costs.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, I've heard of some schools, they stopped, not colleges, but like even grade schools, they stopped providing lunches for the kids because of the cost.
Yeah.
And that
So what are they supposed to do?
the parents have to bring it, and they might provide it like a couple days a week or something like that. But it's just, to me, that's mind blowing.
It is
like
mind-blowing.
it used to be $1.10, like, or something like that. I remember bringing per day, and that's I think that's when I learned. And we always had our little milk, and and the school lunches were not the best quality probably at that time, but they were better than what they're probably getting now.
Exactly.
And
and better than no food. And
exactly. And how many I remember kids not even having that was their only meal.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so to me that's sad. Like if the school's not providing it, they're probably not getting it. And so it just I just know that you can get good quality food wherever you go. It's just choosing that. And going back to like how you worked with WIC, I worked at Walgreens for 13 years as a pharmacy technician, but I saw a lot of stuff. And I remember the things that people would buy with the food stamps or WIC card or whatever it was, definitely was not the eggs in the refrigerated section. It was not the protein that they had. Like, I mean, even Walgreens has like, you can walk into any store and you can at least get eggs and bacon or whatever. And I'd rather you do that than the Fruity Pebbles or exactly. Yeah, you can get cans of tuna. You can get good choices, but they were getting the chips, the Coke, and it was just, it made me cringe. And, and I just felt so bad. Like, at that time, I just was like, are you sure you don't need the protein that's over in this section? Like I can show you, I'll take you there, and that's just something that I'm hoping we will see a change, because I do think that's the political side of things. I think that's what the goal is for some of that, is to make it where they are given better choices. I'm hoping. That's where I hope to see the change. And that, therefore, I'm hoping all of this together will help reduce the cardiovascular disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, all the chronic conditions that we are seeing, and inflammatory diseases, that is out there
all
these
this
days.
Obesity, exactly. And starting at a younger age, I'll bring it back to what's included in the guidelines too, which is talking about nutrition across the life cycle. And it's really important to focus on the different populations based on where you are in life. Whether you're a pregnant, lactating woman, or are we talking about feeding infants and children, which, like I said, my first job was in that area of working in a WIC program.
Yeah.
Still passionate about that, of course.
Yeah.
But that said, school-age children, adolescents, teens, young adults, and really getting them involved in understanding how to put together a healthy plate. And that's why I kind of missed the My Plate. It's easier to talk about what to eat on a daily basis when you're looking at a plate of food than a pyramid.
I agree with you.
polling.
So do you think they're going to update the My Plate, or would you, in your own words, would you take what they've done with the food guidelines now and create your own My Plate? Would your plate change?
Would my plate change, or the plate that I would like to show?
Okay, with the plate that you used to talk about, because I used to, the My Plate was basically like a peace sign, right?
It had half of your plate as vegetables, and then like a
quarter.
Yeah, a quarter of.
Yeah.
Is it a third or a quarter of your protein, and then your starch, and so really focusing on the plant-forward type eating, which, take that at face value, that would be higher in fiber than maybe people are choosing now.
Right.
So in this new pyramid, you mentioned the oats, and at the bottom of this new pyramid, it's the tiniest amount. I think there are maybe 6 little pieces of oatmeal.
Yeah.
It's not enough.
Right.
It's not enough. So back to the plate, and what I think we need to really focus on too is educating the educators on what constitutes, pulling from that, whether it's the pyramid or a plate, what does constitute a healthy, balanced plate that does include variety of foods, includes good fats, it includes lean proteins, and I'll stick with lean proteins, whether they're plant or animal based, and the good carbohydrates that give us, the fiber.
Things are changing so fast in healthcare. Now we have to keep in mind that there's so many people in this country on GLP-1s who just aren't eating very much. They're eating very little. So if they're eating small amounts of food, restaurants are now even changing their menus to match GLP-1
Such a
people.
great point.
Right?
Oh,
So
I'm thinking.
you have to figure if you're going to only eat a little bit, what are you going to go for? What are you going to eat more of?
Protein.
Yeah.
That's my answer.
And that's what I tell my
and
patients
that's what
as well.
this is basically telling you, because we're seeing a lot of sarcopenia in this world too. Like, because people are on these GLP-1s, they're not getting the essential amino acids, I think, or seeds. Like you said, you get the seeds, get the essential amino acids that we need. Oh, I had a question for you, and I totally forgot what I was going to say now. But
Related to protein?
it was
It's GLP-1.
Well, I was also going to say that everything should match where you are in life,
Correct.
right? The
That's
college student is not going to be eating the same as the
the 50-year-old on
85-year-old.
right, or the 50-year-old on a GLP-1
Right.
who's obese. I mean, an active 22-year-old has dramatically different needs than an
Yep.
obese midlife
Exactly.
person
And does
versus the elderly.
the new guidelines talk about that?
No,
Okay, so
that's not true.
okay,
Very,
briefly.
very briefly.
So that's what I was actually going to ask is total caloric intake. Is it still based on a 2,000 calorie diet?
Yes.
Okay. And does it break that down for pregnancy versus 20 to 30 years old versus, okay, it does
No,
not.
Not that specifically.
Did the
no.
previous one?
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah. So we've got some work they need to go back and tune it up a little bit because I
Right.
agree. Like, I don't think, oftentimes, and luckily we do a body composition analysis in the office that tells us how many calories somebody burns at rest, right? The basal metabolic rate. So I love looking at that for people, and I'm always surprised a little bit, but what I see always to the T is when people gain muscle, they can eat more calories.
True.
And you're burning more, right?
Right.
And like you said, a young growing male can totally eat a 2,500, 3,000 calorie diet for the most part if they're physically active, and it goes back to the exercise. Just like you said, nobody should be eating a 2,000 calorie diet if you're not exercising. If you are not moving, that is the problem. And so I know when I don't exercise, I go down to my BMR. I go down to what I know my body burns at rest, and I try not to go too much above that because I will just retain it. It'll just sit on me then. So this is quite interesting, and that's why we have dietitians out there like you
Exactly.
that know these guidelines, that can tell us more. And that's another reason why we just love working with you, Susan. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And people need to keep in mind, guidelines change all the time and
Always.
not always for the better.
Right.
Like the JNC guidelines for hypertension change all the time. The lipid guidelines change all the time. And I don't completely agree with the lipid guidelines. So, but
Well, that's one of the things that didn't change in here too. Is the lipid guidelines didn't change, is what I heard.
From the amounts, exactly.
amounts.
But then that visualization did. And so there's,
Right.
they're really conflicting, actually.
Yeah.
Right. So there's some good things about this
Yes.
new update, and there's some controversial things. And, hopefully they're continuing to work on this in the background. But I have one last question for you. So what is one takeaway, I guess, again, I know you've said a lot of good points here, but if the listeners could just remember one thing about this new update, what would you recommend?
We'll keep it simple and still focus on eating a wide variety of foods, I think is absolutely the most important. So more variety than a very limited number of foods every day. So focus on balance, variety. I say the same messages all the time, and then eat more seasonal and local foods if you can.
Okay, I lied. I have one more question. Okay. So the last question. What is one old habit from the previous food guidelines that they should drop?
Old ones. Let me see. From that original, from the early pyramid?
Maybe the one that people grew up with. Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Like
thinking
the-
about that 1992 food
Yeah.
pyramid. Well, the good thing that we've, again, gotten away from is like not adding all of these refined carbohydrates. I think we all understand that
And ultra-processed foods were never
ultra-processed foods,
mentioned.
exactly. Quite
Right.
honestly, if we could just stop eating so many ultra-processed foods that are laden with the bad sugars, a lot of added sugar, sodium. I didn't even touch on sodium. And
No, we did not.
I know. I apologize for that. That's a little oversight, because what are we reducing? Processed foods that include bad fats, bad sugars, and a lot of added sodium. And the guidelines are very specific for sodium intake at all ages. And that's really important. Maybe we do a whole podcast.
We
on,
should.
on sodium. And
All right. That's our next one. Great.
there.
All right. Is there, do you have a way that anybody could find you, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, my website, susangreeley.com, Susan, GREELEY.com. And I'm out there as FoodMedRDN on Instagram, and for Food is Medicine.
And you also wrote a book. Could you tell people about this?
Yes. The first book that I wrote is at this point 13 years old, but it was called Lighten Up, Cooking with Trader Joe's Cookbook. And in that, I do have a diet. And I think that's when I first published my good fats, fiber, and phytonutrients tagline that I use and love to preach.
Yeah. And 13 years ago, and it's still very
absolutely
timely even now.
Thank
Exactly.
you.
It's not outdated.
It is not at all outdated, and I am working on some, new things.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you
Thank
for
you for
coming on.
having me.
All right.